All right, everyone, stop whatever you are doing right now because what we just witnessed in Indianapolis was not just a practice session. It was a massive statement. It was an absolute earthquake that just shook the entire foundation of the WNBA. Day one of the Indiana Fever training camp is officially in the books. And let me tell you, the atmosphere inside that building was electric. The cameras were everywhere, flashing like blinding strobe lights. The media was buzzing. The nervous executives watched from their elevated balconies, and the entire professional basketball world held its collective breath. Why? Because the queen is back. Caitlin Clark has officially stepped back onto the polished hardwood of the Gainbridge Fieldhouse, and the world of women's basketball will never be the same again. And if you thought she was going to come back slowly, you were wrong. If you thought she was going to be cautious after her injury, you were completely and utterly dead wrong. Caitlin Clark didn't just walk through those double doors. She reclaimed her absolute throne. She sat down at her locker, laced up her signature sneakers, and walked onto that court without saying a single solitary word to the hovering media scrums. She didn't issue a PR statement. She didn't need to. She just reminded every single sweating executive in that building and every single terrified franchise in this league exactly who she is and exactly who holds the absolute power. For the last 7 days, the internet has been on fire. We have heard every single conspiracy theory you can possibly imagine. Not where the deafeningly loud narrative was that the Indiana Fever front office was actively purposefully sabotaging Caitlin Clark. People were screaming that the executives were on a clandestine mission to completely destroy her historic impact. They said that drafting a defensive point guard like Raven Johnson was a targeted, malicious setup from the very beginning. They said head coach Stephanie White was plotting in the dark to move Clark off the ball, strip her of her playmaking superpowers, and turn her into nothing more than a spot-up shooting decoy. But what actually happened on day one of camp when the basketballs finally tipped off? All of those internet conspiracy theories just completely evaporated into thin air. The truth came out on the court, and the truth is mathematically and psychologically terrifying for the rest of the WNBA. Caitlin Clark ran the offense. Full stop. End of discussion. She had the basketball securely and permanently in her hands. She was the engine, the conductor, and the general of this team. She was pushing the transition tempo at a breakneck speed that left defenders completely gasping for air. She was finding backdoor cutters before they even knew they were open. She was throwing pinpoint geometric no-look transition passes through impossible windows that made grown professionals stop and stare in sheer disbelief. She was pulling up from 35 foot right on top of the painted logo, shooting the basketball like the rim owed her money. Let's talk about the physical reality of what we saw today. You have to remember the absolute hell this young woman went through. Caitlin Clark has been away from competitive WNBA basketball for 8 long, or an agonizing months. She spent that entire time rehabbing from cascading soft tissue injuries. We're talking about the groin issues, the quad strains, the ankle sprains, all born from the sheer exhaustion of carrying a massive franchise on her back while being physically assaulted full court every single night of her rookie season. Most players would come back looking a little rusty. Most players would look a little hesitant. Most players would look like fragile, broken athletes who needed to be heavily protected and coddled by the medical staff. But not Caitlin. She did not look rusty. She did not look cautious. She looked like an apex predator who had been locked inside a dark cage for 8 months, just counting down the agonizing seconds until she could break the lock, get back on a basketball court, and destroy absolutely everything in front of her. No rust, no hesitation, no caution, just pure, unadulterated, highly lethal Caitlin Clark basketball. And if you needed more proof that she is fully back and completely unstoppable, just look at the massive warning shot she fired in Puerto Rico last month. During the FIA World Cup qualifiers, Caitlin Clark went up against elite physical international competition. And what did she do? She took over the entire globe. She won the undisputed FIA tournament MVP. In one specific game against Senegal, operating against massive international physicality, she dropped an astonishing 17 points and 12 assists in just 19 minutes of playing time. She hit 4 or 5 from beyond the arc. 19 minutes. That is a level of hyper-efficiency that literally breaks basketball analytics algorithms. But as she walked into the Fever training camp today, looking like she took those international experiences, bottled up the ultimate confidence, and used them as a high-octane launching pad for this new season. Now we have to address the massive elephant in the room. Raven Johnson. The drama merchants, the engagement farmers, and the hot take artists on social media have been praying for a massive fight. They wanted tension. They wanted a bitter rivalry that would tear this locker room apart. But if you were looking for toxic drama today, you were severely disappointed. Raven Johnson looked like she absolutely belonged on a professional floor. She was not intimidated by the suffocating, flashing media moment. She was not rattled by the deafening, controversial noise surrounding her rival in Indianapolis. She was doing exactly what the Indiana Fever drafted her to be. Relentless point of attack defensive specialist who adds a physical, gritty dimension to a perimeter defense that has desperately needed it for years. She was not taking Caitlin Clark's spot. She was not running the point guard position while the greatest passer in the world stood frozen and useless in the corner. She was a humble sponge, putting her head down, grinding and competing her absolute heart out. And here is the beautiful detail that should permanently silence every single person who screamed that these two players could not peacefully coexist. Caitlin Clark and Raven Johnson were on the exact same court today. They practiced together. They ran drills together. They communicated through screens. They competed against each other in scrimmages. And guess what? The world did not explode. Superstar center Aaliyah Boston called it perfectly on her podcast last week. She said, "The fans and the media always have way more beef than the actual players do." She was exactly 100% right. Caitlin Clark and Raven Johnson are elite, hyper-focused professionals who share a championship pedigree. They do not carry fake internet beef onto a basketball court. They carry basketballs. They carry a burning desire to win. And today they proved that a locked-down perimeter defender and a transcendent offensive point guard can absolutely complement each other perfectly. But what about the coaching staff? What about head coach Stephanie White and her rigid defensive systems? Let me explain the brilliant, intense psychological warfare that Caitlin Clark executed before this camp even started. My Caitlin Clark is not just a transcendent basketball player. She is a grandmaster in a game of chess. Listen to the specific words Caitlin used when she publicly praised Stephanie White's basketball mind recently. Caitlin looked at the media and stated, "She knows what she is doing. She knows how to put people in positions to be successful. She is going to put us in lineups that are successful." In the hyper-scrutinized, ego-driven world of professional sports, that is not just a polite throwaway compliment. That is a public psychological ultimatum wrapped in a nice little bow. Caitlin Clark was telling the entire basketball world that she fully expects her head coach to be smart enough and selfless enough to put players in the exact geometric positions on the floor where they mathematically thrive. And where does Caitlin Clark mathematically thrive? Where does she completely break defensive analytics with a basketball securely in her hands, running the point position, dictating the tempo, orchestrating the half-court offense, and leading the entire league in assists? If Stephanie White tried to enforce that dreaded off-ball philosophy today, if she actually tried to force Clark into the corner, she would have been actively, deliberately violating the very basketball genius that Caitlin Clark just publicly praised her for having. It was a brilliant tactical checkmate by the franchise player, executed flawlessly before the first official preseason game even tipped off. Stephanie White had absolutely no choice but to hand her the keys to the Ferrari. And let me tell you about the absolute overwhelming firepower that Caitlin Clark is orchestrating this season. This is not the exhausted, depleted roster she carried last year. This is a heavily armed, meticulously constructed championship-caliber armada. The teammates surrounding her are better, deeper, more versatile, and more lethal than anything she has ever had the privilege of playing with in her entire life. Let's break down exactly who is on the floor with number 22. First, you have Aaliyah Boston. She is fresh off signing a massive historic 4-year, $6.3 million extension. She is the ultimate anchor in the paint. She is the ultimate pick and roll partner for Caitlin. Their chemistry is the undisputed foundation of this entire franchise. When Boston sets those bone-crushing screens, It creates a defensive nightmare that opposing coaches literally lose sleep over. Then you have Kelsey Mitchell, a $1.4 million Supermax peer scorer who averaged a blistering 20.2 points per game last year. She is coming back fully healthy and absolutely ready to feast. When opposing defenses panic and send 2 or 3 defenders to trap Caitlin Clark at half court, Kelsey Mitchell is going to be waiting on the wing, ready to knock down wide-open looks all night long. And then we have to talk about the absolute game share on the perimeter. Sophie Cunningham. This is where this team gets truly terrifying. Sophie Cunningham brings the perimeter enforcer energy, the necessary trash talk, and the absolute bodyguard mentality to protect Caitlin Clark from cheap shots. We all saw the extreme physical abuse Caitlin took last year. Teams tried to bully her. Teams tried to break her. That stops right now. You cannot play dirty against Caitlin Clark when Sophie Cunningham is standing right next to her. Sophie brings a fierce, unrelenting toughness to this roster, and she backs it up by hitting massive clutch shots from the outside. Having Caitlin and Sophie sharing the backcourt is going to bring an intimidating swagger to the Indiana Fever that this league is not ready for. But the weapons do not stop there. You have Lexi Hull, who turned into an absolute sniper last season, shooting a blistering 47% from three-point range whenever she shares the floor with Clark. You have Monique Billings adding extreme vertical physicality and relentless rebounding to secure vital second-chance points. Next, you have Maisha Hines-Allen bringing championship-level passing and high IQ basketball from the post position. You have Tasha Harris providing rock-solid, calm veteran backcourt stability off the bench. And you have the highly touted rookie Justine Pellington, a massive 6 feet 4 inches floor spacer who shot 42% from deep in college, stretching the defense to its absolute physical breaking point. This is not just a random collection of names pulled out of a hat. This is a terrifying juggernaut. It is being driven by a generational superstar who is firmly and unapologetically at the controls. This roster has the elite shooting to punish teams that double-team Clark. It has the dominant interior presence to punish teams that switch small defenders onto the block. And it finally has the gritty defensive identity to survive the grueling fourth quarter collapses that plagued them in the past. Now, we operate on pure logic here. One single practice does not settle everything permanently. Terrifying, relentless juggernaut. And it will not be because of the front office.